about standing up against one foreign country invading another foreign country. It's about American leadership in the world. So we will continue to articulate that and make that clear. And that is part of the reason why the president also detailed in specificity today what all of this would go to. I mean, some of it, a great deal of it is, of course, to military assistance to fight this war, but there is funding in there, as he noted this morning, for food security and ensuring that we are addressing any food shortages around the world. There's assistance that is going into humanitarian assistance and helping the outflow of refugees. And so it was important to him personally to lay out the specifics in his remarks this morning.
So again, a really simple question.
Yes, thanks, Jen. Looking ahead to the president.
One question. You give these people 6 questions in the front row.
Looking ahead to the president's trip to Japan that was announced last night, I'm wondering if you can talk about, in the Quad Summit, wondering if you can talk about how the president will raise sort of a unified response to Russia with India at the table, and then also sort of the China-Taiwan issue.
Well, on the first part, on Russia, I would say first we've had a number of engagements, as you know, with leaders in India about our approach to supporting the Ukrainians in this war, whether that is sanctions and the enormous sanctions package we've put in place, or of course the assistance we've provided. We will convey the same sentiment in this meeting. Now, this meeting is several weeks away, so a lot can certainly happen. And as you know, other members of the Quad have also been vital partners and vital, supporters of the Ukrainians' effort to fight the war, including Japan. I mean, Japan, just as an example, has not only provided a range of assistance, but they've also agreed to divert some of the LNG resources to help Europe. So there's a number of steps they have also taken that will be a part of the discussion. And certainly the president will provide an update on what we're doing and where things stand at that point in time. We're just not quite there on previewing the agenda yet. Obviously, the president's position on Taiwan has not changed. He will certainly restate it during this meeting, but I'm sure we'll have more to preview as we get closer to the trip.
China-Taiwan? How will that be raised as well?
Again, as we get closer to the trip, there's not a change in our policy. Obviously, the president's policy is based on the Taiwan Relations Act. That will continue, and as we get closer to the trip, I'm sure we'll have more to preview. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. One question on Moldova, one on COVID. Do you have any update, any insight on the explosions in Transnistria earlier in the week?
Yeah.
And if the Russians were to open a new front in Moldovan territory, would that trigger any new consequences for Russia?
On the first part, I just don't have a new confirmation or new details to read out from here. We're still continuing to look at the explosions from earlier this week. I'm just not going to get ahead of a hypothetical at this point in time in terms of what consequences there would be.
Yesterday you were talking about how there's great access to Paxlovid in the country. You're trying to get the word out on its effectiveness. One of the main issues with Paxlovid is that an individual who's eligible has to test positive, and then they have to race to get it within 3 days, even though they're quarantining. Is there any conversation within the administration to change that for an eligible individual to be able to get it preemptively?
I think that would be a decision likely made by our health and medical experts, so I just don't have anything to preview at this point in time. It requires a prescription, right? But there are a range of ways to have those conversations with your doctor, so I'm not sure it always involves a race to the doctor's office, but different doctors can have virtual appointments and other means of getting prescriptions. It's about consulting to ensure you're eligible.
Question.
Thank you, Jen. So I have a question on Ukraine and then a follow-up on my colleague's question. Zelensky's top advisor tweeted today that Ukraine should decide whether to strike Russian military facilities. I know you've spoken on this before, but you're trying to avoid a hypothetical situation. But this seems like it's getting closer towards a non-hypothetical situation. Can you at least outline?
I appreciated that. Okay, go ahead.
Whether the administration believes that this is escalatory or could be constructive.
Well, one, I think it's important to take a step back and remember what we're talking about here. I mean, it is Russia that started this war, invaded Ukraine, and violated Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It's Russian forces that have committed war crimes and horrifying atrocities, and it's Russia that continues to attack Ukrainian targets in Ukraine every day. So even if we are, dare I say, getting into a hypothetical, what we're talking about here is not any intention of Ukraine invading Russia and trying to take Russian territory, going after Russian civilians, going after Russian hospitals. We're talking about consideration of military targets. It's something very different, so I just think that's important context for everybody to consider.
Still on Ukraine, there's no formal announcement as of right now about Jakarta inviting Zelensky to the G20, but our sources suggest that they are indeed inviting both Zelensky as well as Putin. So under those circumstances, would the president consider attending? I know it's still 6 months away, but under those circumstances, if it remains the same.
Well, we certainly welcomed reports about Ukraine's invitation. Obviously, we can't confirm that on behalf of Indonesia, who is hosting, and the president has been clear about his view this shouldn't be business as usual and that Russia should not be a part of this. But again, it's 6 months away. We don't even have confirmation of these reports, so I'm certainly not going to get into a hypothetical in this case.
To follow up on the issue of Americans being concerned about the amount of money being sent out to Ukraine, one of the things that the president outlined today in his speech was not just humanitarian assistance, but also allow pensions and social support to be paid to the Ukrainian people. So what would you say to the American public who says, okay, it's one thing to help Ukrainian refugees with food and shelter, but why should we be paying for their pensions?
Well, look, I would say that we have provided a range of economic assistance because we know that their economy has been devastated, not of their doing, because they were invaded by a foreign country. And they're going, let me finish. And they are going to need assistance in order to recover. We provide assistance, economic and humanitarian assistance, to a range of countries around the world because that's part of American leadership. And so I would say that's the reasoning for this assistance being proposed in the package. Go ahead.
Jen, on menthol, going back to the opposition in the Black community. I talked to Congresswoman Frederica Wilson today, and she said she's opposing it. She says the president should not only deal with menthol, but ban all instead of just menthol. She feels that it will cause a profiling issue. And she also says this is something that should not be dealt with in the midterms because it will split the Black community. What do you say to that? And are you talking to Frederica Wilson, Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and others about this very issue?